This short demonstration will show how to configure and use the Lozen OpenAPI Connector with Microsoft Azure Logic Apps Integration Platform as a Service. The Lozen OpenAPI Connector conforms to the OpenAPI specification, a vendor-neutral format governed by the OpenAPI initiative. As this is an open standard, any implementation that conforms to the OpenAPI spec is self-documenting and can be viewed in any conforming API editor. Lozen maps the full IBM Z system VSAM semantics onto a simple RESTful API. As you can see here, we provide retrieval of file metadata as well as sequential and key-based operations mapped to the available HTTP verbs. Now let's take a look at how we can use the Lozen OpenAPI custom connector in Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. The Lozen API library is used as the basis for defining an Azure function app, where the various API methods available from the Lozen API are published as functions in an Azure resource group. We can view the details and monitor the executions of the function app in the Azure portal. If we select functions on the left-hand side of the portal, we can see the available Lozen API methods that are bound to the function app. These are the same operations we previously viewed in our OpenAPI specification. These functions, along with their HTTP request-response pairs, are available to be used in a Logic Apps workflow. Switching to the Logic Apps Designer, we can see how Lozen operations can be inserted into a workflow as actions. Here we have created a simple workflow where the trigger is an HTTP request. Input values are passed to the function via parameters in the URI. We will respond to the trigger with the Lozen read sequential action. Looking at the details of the configuration of the read sequential step, we can see the parameters that are passed to the API, including a file name, the number of records to prefetch, and whether and how to transform the data coming from the server. The Lozen API will receive the API request and pass it to the Lozen server running on an IBM Z system. The response will be returned to Logic Apps, and the workflow will store the response in a JSON structure that can be processed by a subsequent step. We can test the workflow in the Logic Apps Designer by selecting Run with Payload. For this test, we will define the file name as students.ksds and request a maximum of 5 records to be returned by each read request. When we click the Run button, the request is passed to the read sequential function in the Azure Function app, which is bound to the Lozen API library executing in an Azure-managed Linux virtual machine. The API formats the request and sends it to the Lozen server, which reads the student's VSAM file and returns the records that match the request. The function returns to the workflow, which then populates the JSON structure, which we can view in the output pane of our Run with Payload dialog. We hope you have found this demo useful. For further information, please contact VirtualZ via email, phone, or social media.